Well, good morning, everyone. For Thursday, we have a good crowd. How many folks here from healthcare and life sciences? Woohoo! Okay, that's great. Welcome all. This is Aashima Gupta. I'm the Global Director for Healthcare Strategy and Solutions at Google Cloud. Pleasure to host you all. In a world where AI and data-powered innovations are reshaping the healthcare and life sciences ecosystem in the industry, the conversation about Gen AI is both critical and timely. As you saw in our keynote, our ecosystem of customers and partners are leading the way in applying Gen AI in exciting ways. And at Google Cloud, we are committed to creating values in broadly three big ways. Number one, being the most open Gen AI platform through Vertex, supporting our first-party models, but also supporting a variety of third-party models for customers to build, deploy, ground, and train their Gen AI models on Google Cloud. Second, being both bold and responsible. In April, we announced MedPalm 2, our medically tuned LLM for the healthcare industry through a trusted tester program. And we are now expanding access to MedPalm 2 through more customers through a private preview. And third, our third approach is much more, healthcare is a heavily regulated industry, so anything we deploy in Gen AI is grounded on privacy, safety, security at its very core, and guided by our AI principles. We highlighted some of that work in our keynote in the last few days, and now I have a pleasure to dive deeper into some of those use cases with two customers today. The way the format will work, I'll kick off the discussion with Dr. Schlosser. We'll have a fireside chat for 25 minutes or so, and then I will pass it over to Shweta, my colleague, who will dive deeper into the life sciences use cases. So with that, Dr. Schlosser, welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Healthcare is a heavily regulated industry. And according to a new Bain report, 75% healthcare executives feel that Gen AI will be transformational, but only 6% have a Gen AI strategy in place. And you've been leading the way in Gen AI. How have you shaped the Gen AI strategy in a regulated industry?
Yeah, well, as you know, because we've been working together on this for a long time, it's been quite a journey. We started with Google Cloud almost 3 years ago now, really beginning with the foundation that's required for Gen AI, which is to have good data. And so we sought to modernize our entire data infrastructure. We'd had an enterprise data warehouse that we'd used for years to look mostly retrospectively at our data, and decided we needed to up our game and really take advantage of cloud computing and the kinds of data infrastructures that cloud allowed for us. So that was fortunate, sometimes better to be lucky than good. So we were 2 years into our journey almost by the time Gen AI really came onto the scene. And the second fortunate thing that we did was we stood up a new strategy that I had the pleasure of leading called Care Transformation and Innovation. And this was a dedicated group inside of HCA, multidisciplinary, including clinical leaders, operational leaders, business, finance, change management, data science, technology, who would be solely focused on the idea that we could use technology to transform healthcare delivery for the better. So because we had those two things in place, we were in a good position when Gen AI really came onto the scene to take advantage of it. And there were a couple of principles, I would say, that we applied from the very beginning. And the first one, which you've sort of already highlighted, is responsible AI. So we immediately knew we had to have a structure in place to understand the ethical, the legal, the compliance, the patient safety issues around Gen AI, and really artificial intelligence intelligence in general. And I would say one of the key outcomes of those conversations was that we would always have a human in the loop. Our first use cases were never going to be sort of directly facing a patient or used in such a way that they would be directly driving care in some way, that they would always be something that would be recommending to a person, a clinician, a physician, a nurse. They would have the opportunity to review whatever the output was before it ever really got into the clinical care setting. And the other was that we would focus those use cases on what we refer to as administrative burden. So really directing our efforts around how can we make the lives of our caregivers better and easier, make their jobs more efficient, more effective, more joyful, reduce some of this burden that we've heaped upon our healthcare providers through EHRs and other manual processes that have sort of built up over time. Can we start to use AI to strip that away and bring caregivers back to the top of their license where they can come to work every day just focused on their patients, and the technology can help take away and put into the background some of that current administrative burden. So that, I would say, kind of summarizes our current thinking about our Gen AI strategy, and we're very excited. That ocean of opportunity is deep. The amount of benefit we can provide our caregivers, I think, is enormous.
Thank you. And when you talk about the administrative burden, I read the statistics. 900,000 nurses plan to leave the profession by 2027. The nurses are critical to the healthcare ecosystem. And when you look into physician as well, 60% or so face some criteria of the burnout. How many folks here have heard of a term called pajama time? So on an average, 90 minutes, physicians go home and spend time on clerical, administrative, paperwork, document stuff, and these documents are important. This is how healthcare runs. There's a lot of information both on the patient's journey, but also a lot of billing information as well. One of the use cases that you have picked between nurses handoff is at the heart of that issue on the documentation. Could you elaborate more on that?
Sure, I will. But I want to comment on the 900,000 and the pajama time, because I think this sometimes is underrepresented, that we don't fully understand the gap that we have between the demand for healthcare services in the United States and the available healthcare practitioners to provide to that demand. It's nurses, it's physicians, and that gap is widening. The pandemic took a step up. We lost a lot of people in the pandemic to retirement or other roles, but then that gap just continues to widen. And so we really need this tool. This is very timely. We've got to figure out a way that we can close that gap. I mean, we need more healthcare providers, and we're trying to help in that space as well. But I think AI has a great opportunity to help us close the gap. So to your question, one of the use cases we are working on is around a nurse handoff tool. So the nurses, when they are leaving shift, have to hand off all of their patients to the next incoming shift. And as all the healthcare providers in the room know, handoffs are always a risky time in healthcare delivery. It has to be done well, it has to be done safely, so that the incoming team knows what they need to know so they can pick up and immediately start caring for those patients. And so it's a very manual process right now. The nurses dig through the chart, they keep notes on paper throughout a shift, and try to collate all of the information that they'll need so that they can make that intelligent handoff. And so, if we have 90,000 nurses across HCA, that process is probably being done about 90,000 different ways. But it's a huge opportunity for standardization and safety if we can have a Gen AI tool provide that for them. So we've trained an AI. We're actually trying this out in multiple different form factors, but we've trained an AI to be able to read the chart, summarize the key information, the key lab values and radiology and other events that have occurred, as well as make recommendations about what are the key things to be looking out for the next shift, for the next 12 hours, and then produce that note in an automated way for the both outgoing and incoming nurse. And then they use that as a tool. So again, human in the loop, they review it, make sure that it's accurate, and then they can use that as a way to drive that conversation. It's also an interactive interactive tool. One of the really cool things about Gen AI is that you can interact with it in a human-like way. And so if the nurse wants to add something to that handoff report, say I want to know the pain scores for this particular patient as well, they can, in a natural language way, ask the AI to add that to the report, and it can add it in and then regenerate the report for them with the key details. So it meets the nurses where they are. It's not a new tool that's complicated that they have to figure out how to use and dig through the EHR to find. It sort of can be easily available to them, and they can interact with it in a natural way, and it removes burden and makes that process more safely. So we're still in proof of concept. We're testing that at our Innovation Hub Hospital at UCF Lake Nona. That use case really is the very beginning. The background technology that my excellent data science team has built to enable that use case is reproducible. And so we can take it to the next idea and the next idea, and that's where things will really get exciting.
That's really exciting. And as you open the panel with the data strategy, to be able to do the different use cases, you already worked on the hard work of laying down the pipes, standardizing the data in FHIR. We've been working with you on that. And as we were discussing this, one of the things that you mentioned was it's not about, yes, about use cases and the models, but it's also about the platform. And having the approach of blended models, some provided by Google Cloud, some MedPalm, some Palm, and some even wide variety of third-party models. Can you share why this blended approach and having a platform that supports that is critical to you and your journey?
Sure, and I'll use one of the other examples, one of the other use cases that we're working on right now as an example. So we're working with a company called Augmetics, which is another Google partner, on a physician documentation solution. So an ambient listening approach to documentation. We're doing this in the emergency room with ER doctors. They can walk into a patient's room, interview the patient. The AI is listening through, right now, an iPhone, and it can transcribe the entire conversation, both parties, and then turn that transcription into structured documentation. That's a really challenging and laborious process if you're using more traditional natural language processing techniques. Gen AI has massively accelerated that because the AI is so capable at understanding that language. But what we've found is that the different models are good at different parts of that conversation. So MedPalm 2, for example, which we're in testing in R&D phase, is really good at things like the medical decision making when the physician is talking about really the critical and complicated medical aspects of the care because it's trained on medical data. A generic model like Palm will actually do better when listening to the patient talk about their social history or things that they're just doing in sort of a more natural language that a patient would use. And so to your point, we actually anticipate that even a solution like that might use multiple models for an individual use case. And then through those use cases, we're also learning what each model is good at, and they're all good at slightly different things. And so the idea that we have a platform where we can bring whichever models we need, we can train them, we can put prompt engineering around them. It all occurs in our private environment, so all that patient data we're using to train does not go back to the base model, does not go to Google or anyone else. But that's really powerful for us, and so we're building up that IP inside our platform, our instance, so that, again, we can reuse it and we can reuse the knowledge for future use cases.
And I believe that's the big deal in your feedback on the model, creating your own prompts, fine-tuning that in your environment, which is pretty private, meaning no data leakage, no IP leakage. And to me, that's the IP development to make the model effective for a given use case. And we all know in Gen AI, model effectiveness will be the currency of how Gen AI will be brought into the clinical workflows. Are they effective for a given use case? But technology is but just one part of the equation. You mentioned change management.
Yes.
What's been the hardest part?
Well, the change management is the hardest part. So we were on a panel yesterday, and I got this question and it immediately resonated that despite the fact that we, may be bringing the nurses an amazing tool to help them with a handoff, or providing physicians with a really great way to improve their documentation and improve the throughput for their, their workflow. They're resistant. Healthcare providers are resistant to change. Again, I'm speaking to an audience with a lot of healthcare, so you all know this. And they're resistant actually for a very good reason. They have people's lives at stake. And so they feel like they found a way to get through their workflow, and it's working and it's safe. And so they're hesitant to make big changes to it. So we had to dedicate a lot of effort and a lot of resources. I have a dedicated change management team as part of my care transformation team that is purely focused on how do we help manage folks through this change. And you actually have to do it at multiple levels. It's the individual doctor and nurse. It's also the organization, the organizations, the hospitals, even HCA can be resistant to change, sort of for the same reasons. And so we have to sort of teach and educate at every level of the organization so that everyone understands the vision, where we're trying to go, that this is really all about helping the caregivers, making their lives better, making the patient outcomes better, and kind of continue to say that message over and over again. But don't overlook the change management aspects of this. The tools are cool and exciting, and everyone gets excited about it. But then when it comes to like it's their turn to like do something different, their attitude sometimes changes a little bit.
Change management. How many startups in the audience? Raise your hands. Not many. I was going to ask the question, what advice, but I'll change it. What advice do you have for participating startup ecosystem, or now in this case for healthcare life sciences company, based on your past 6 months into Gen AI, but past 2.5 years on data?
Yeah. This is a journey. I have yet to find any sort of quick win, easy button kind of solutions. We have to embed ourselves in the hospitals with our care teams, see things from their perspective, understand their pain points, how they want to see the problem solved. Not get anchored in the old way of doing things, of course, because we're trying to move forward, but we've got to sort of meet them in the middle there and figure out how do we bring them along to this new way of working, and they have to come with us, and they have to help us design those new solutions. So I would be weary of anyone whose sales pitch is that we can sort of just solve this problem for you, or anyone coming and selling that to you. Instead, I would say, like, let's bring good technology, and then let's focus on the process, focus on the change management, partner deeply, which is something that I really appreciate about Google and the work we've done together, and then have a long view of let's solve some big problems. Let's not just try to sprinkle some Gen AI on top of our current healthcare system so we can say we're using it. Let's get in and dig deep and solve some big problems.
So talking about long view, I know we have one more question before we wrap this fireside chat. Where do you see 5 years from now? We are here, we're talking about Gen AI success. Where do you believe this will have the most impact, and what we would have seen 5 years from now?
Well, so I've been in and around healthcare, either as a practicing neurosurgeon or on the administrative side now for more than 2 decades. And I can honestly say I've never been more excited about the future of healthcare. You read that a lot, it's a lot of hyperbole, but honestly, I think it's actually true. When I think about 5, 10 years down the road, I think we can use technology that's available to us now to create a healthcare environment that is highly efficient, highly effective, safe, and also joyful for our caregivers to operate in, where they can come to work, they can just focus on the patient, the documentation takes care of itself, the monitoring and the data is all there to support them, it's feeding them the information they need at the time that they need it. The systems are built for them to make their workflows easier, their lives easier, as opposed to EHRs, which were built for billing and hospital administration and CMS and others. I think that future is absolutely within reach, and I think that it would turn healthcare into something that we don't talk about, burden and burnout, and it would become, what it was when I was young and thought I wanted to become a doctor, which was, a field that was highly respected and everybody wanted to be a part of.
So on that note, thank you all. Thank you all. Please join me in thanking Dr. Schlosser for his time.
Thank you.
I'll pass it over to Shweta.
What are you pressing?
Just the bottom one there.
Okay. So if I want to go. All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Shweta Manyar. I want to first thank Aashima and Dr. Schlosser for illuminating that conversation about how generative AI is applied and used within healthcare. Now, I want to pivot a little bit now to life sciences. As the Global Director for Life Sciences Solutions and Strategy, we could not be more excited about the potential and the application for generative AI in this space across the entire value chain. So there are so many applications, and I'll just give you a few ideas of what we can think about for the future. Imagine, though, for research. For research, you might be able to think about a scientist or a researcher tapping into the potential of generative AI to develop or uncover proteins that are not found naturally in nature. And then being able to further develop those proteins to then to support ones that might have more therapeutic efficiencies or propensities. In drug development, imagine being able to use generative AI and applications of generative AI to develop macromolecules. These researchers, for example, you could use this with antimicrobial peptides. If you could use generative AI there, then maybe we could also then use it to tackle the challenge of antibiotic resistance that's happening. Now, for clinical trials, that's a huge topic. In clinical trials, we can use and potentially leverage generative AI to help with anonymizing and creating synthetic data. Patient privacy and patient data is of the utmost importance when it comes to clinical development, but it also happens to be one of the most challenging. And to that end, imagine if you could leverage generative AI to develop a set of artificial or synthetic data set that could be used and anonymized in such a way that you would not be able to take a single data point and extrapolate that back to a single individual. For clinical trials, you'd be able to increase the data sets, increase the data, as well as increasing the diversity. This could be a boon for the clinical trial space, not only for those who are sponsoring clinical trials, but those who are executing, as well as creating and analyzing these clinical trials. Similarly, on the imaging and diagnostic side, for imaging and diagnostics, you could still take these synthetic images and be able to use that to feed additional data sets into what is known as data-hungry machine learning models. There's so many other areas that we don't have the time to touch upon in the short time that we have today, including manufacturing, supply chain, logistics, even commercial applications when it comes to generative AI and life sciences. So with that, I would like to actually turn it over to my colleague, Guido Mathews from Bayer, who will actually talk a little bit about some of the current applications and how their organization is looking at AI and the applications of generative AI. Guido?
Thank you very much, Shweta. Thanks for having me.
Yes.
Welcome. So my name is Guido. I'm from Berlin, Germany. I'm heading a function in radiology R&D within Bayer, Imaging Data and AI Research Center of Excellence. And we started a very, very productive partnership with Google roughly 4 years ago.
Yes.
And why Bayer, why Google? So Bayer has a very, very long heritage, over 100 years in medicine. And also we are a leader in radiology. And as some of you might know, radiology is at the forefront of AI applications, of generative AI activities. So this is our promise also to our customers, to patients, fulfilling our Bayer vision, health for all, hunger for none. And from that perspective, we try to drive, together with industry partners like Google, but also to engage with patient societies and regulatory authorities to tap into an area of responsible AI.
Well, tell us a little bit about how is Bayer using generative AI right now? How are you looking at the AI strategy, and how are you going to be applying generative AI in your organization?
So I would also like to refer on that question what Michael already introduced. It's all about data. At the end of the day, 80% of work that has to do with AI comes with data. It's about data cataloging, data readiness, creating frameworks like having something that is completely cloud native. That was our first starting point when we met Google, to create an environment, especially for radiology application development, to have a workbench available that is completely cloud native, and then structure data, have access, have connectivity, have data security, very important. And since we are a global player in the pharmaceutical world, we also need to comply with a lot of regional regulatory requirements and data privacy rules. And this is what we take very, very serious, and where we also have technology partners like Google that help us.
Yeah, absolutely. So I touched upon a lot of what is the potential application, what is the future. What is one type of generative AI or trend or use case that you're particularly excited about?
So there are many.
I'm sure.
Let's focus still on our radiology business here. It's Vertex AI or Vertex Gen AI engine that we are very excited about. On the other side, MedPalm is something we early on started to exchange on and to look for use cases. And there are two topics. On the one side, we have the regulatory framework again that requires a lot of documentation. So some of you that might work in clinical development might understand that you have huge efforts for document development, data evaluation, submission reports, and so on and so forth. And using Gen AI in that field to help to deal with that data, to make them more accessible, to make more automation available, to have report generation. Think about clinical study protocols that need to be written, that are documents with several hundred pages sometimes. You have your outcome reports at the end of a study. All that needs to be generated and then also to be transferred to regulatory authorities. And here we need to partner up in the ecosystem to make much better use of the technology we have, again in a very responsible frame. Yep. Second point, synthetic data or artificially generated data is very much important. Since, of course, we have a lot of data points outside, there's an increase of imaging procedures overall worldwide. The role of imaging in clinical trials has also increased more than 500% over the last years. So think about these data mountains that are out there, and they need to somehow be activated. On the other side, you have special cases, you have special requirements. You really would like to make your AI bulletproof, because at the end of the day, it's meeting a patient. And there's no risk that we should bury on. So therefore, synthetic data generation is something that we are very excited on, and that we try to explore much more, and also make this accessible for us, but also for our partners and the ecosystem.
I couldn't agree more. I think one of the areas is we've been talking about a lot over the past couple of days has been we don't want to do generative AI for the sake of generative AI. And the conversation has been around, well, how do I apply this in my organization, or what can I do? So maybe you can share a little bit about how Bayer is looking. What is the goal of leveraging these use cases for generative AI? What is the ultimate goal for Bayer?
So ultimate goal for us is serving the patients. So it's again, health for all, hunger for none. And since I'm in the pharmaceutical division, I'm talking more on the patient side. We have also our other divisions that also look into several use cases. It's patient first, and this in a responsible way. And then also looking into the ways how we work in pharma R&D, how we execute, how we train talent, how we create a frame that is ready for the future. And these are things all around generative AI that are important. But there's one additional very important thing. With AI and without AI, it's the innovation machine. It's the culture of innovation and really look for breakthrough, look for unmet medical needs and how to use technology and bring this together. And here again, technology partners like Google, pharmaceutical partners, expert companies, but also regulatory authorities. We all together need to partner up to create a frame, also to make AI explainable. Yeah? So that's also something, you can have the nicest tool in your lab. You can easily today, much easier than 2-3 years ago, generated a piece of code and execute it and have results. That needs to become scalable, that needs to become understandable, explainable, and then regulatory bulletproof. Because at the end, it's meeting a patient, and this is where, again, we should not have any risk.
Yeah. Well, so these are all the use cases. How do you think generative AI is actually going to change the way Bayer works, whether you're sitting in sales, whether you're in research, or even for your ultimate customers? How do you think generative AI will have this impact?
So let's start with the customer perspective first. Here, also like Michael was referring to in his talk, we have a shortage on well-trained staff. So radiologists are not given everywhere in the world at a sufficient capacity. So this is a topic we need to address. We have increasing procedures, as I mentioned, worldwide. So think about that AI is able to support the radiologist in his daily routine, to have a better workflow efficiency, to have maybe diagnostic support, to have triage options available to really channel which patients are to he or she has to look first at. We have the whole topic of, again, automated document generation. So reporting, comparison, treatment decisions, treatment support, documentation. So this is how AI will change and hopefully ease up the way how in clinical practice work is done. On the other side, let's move away back to our in-house R&D view. Here is it workflow automation, again for ourselves, the whole topic of document generation, and overall data accessibility, again. So it's all about data. The best AI tool will not work or will not reach its best performance if we have data limitations. And here, not just that 80% of data of projects are delayed, that's an industry benchmark, I think even, where the root cause for this delay is data access and data quality. So having an environment established where you have your continuous data flows available with accuracy, with quality, and then even be able to cover gaps with the generation of artificial data. So this is what will change our work significantly.
So for those in the audience in particular who are trying to understand how they can implement this in their own organization, what do you think is key for you to be able to leverage AI and generative AI in your own organization?
So for all from the healthcare society, again, have your patient in mind. What is the need you try to serve for? And then, of course, second, it comes, what's the business case behind? What's the business value you try to generate? Then it comes finally to culture and readiness. Readiness of AI adaptation, AI execution. And that comes again, talent development, talent retainment. So keeping people up, create excitement, allow for failure, also celebrate failure. Yeah, so not every third shoot will be a success. And finally, the innovation potential. So create an environment where people are empowered, where people feel empowered, really to innovate, try out, pivot, and execute finally. Yeah.
Can you share a little bit, one thing that's unique about the way that we have an opportunity to work with you and the team is you and the IT teams are working very, very closely together in order to see the success of this partnership. Can you share a little bit more about what framework you've given it from a business perspective? How could IT decision makers think about the framework of how to leverage generative AI?
So I think it's similar, like all decision makers will look at it. So again, it's the use case, it's the environment I try to impact, and then overall see the advantages of really moving into a cloud-native environment. So I'm sorry to say this again, but it does not help if you start only with small AI use cases here and there to put it somewhere. It will work for these areas, but you don't leverage the full potential, especially now with having generative AI tools available. You never will come to really a flow in that area. So therefore, you need to really move cloud native, and whatever data source you have, catalog it, make it available. And if this frame is created, then I think every next decision making to invest maybe in a pilot or in the next product development is much, much easier and much, much more successful.
Yeah. Wonderful. Yesterday, you had shared with me a stat that I thought was very interesting around 40 million diagnostic errors that happen. And I think it would be very interesting to talk a little bit about some of that work that you're doing that could potentially impact those error rates that you're referencing.
Yeah, that's a big topic. So again, we have millions of procedures worldwide in radiology and medical imaging, and we have high error rates. And on the other side, these error rates are leading or are coming from shortage of radiologist capacity. You have the typical night shift situation. Yeah, people are working already 20 hours, 24 hours in a routine, and they got called up. There's an emergency case, and sometimes things are overlooked. And that is what we would like to support our customers, giving tools at hand that really help them. That even if they are in a stressful situation, there's a machine like an autopilot in the car these days, right? That helps you a little bit maybe to see the red traffic light or to make a better assessment. We have a lot of incidental findings. So you go, you get a scan, an X-ray or MRI for a certain reason, and there's something else that is not okay in your body. And these incidental findings can be catched up easily if we have AI running in the background in the hospital information system environment and detecting the scans. Scanning over the scans and maybe give a report. That again needs a regulatory framework that is safe. Yeah, so it's not just that we do everything to do a very, very good and high quality product development, but also we need to understand how we will use these technology in the future. And that's therefore again the comparison with the self-driving cars. It's the same. Yeah? What happens if the car is crossing the red traffic light and something goes wrong? So this is what we need to avoid, and therefore it's not a sprint to introduce AI. Even in radiology, we see the highest area in industry on healthcare for AI application clearance and adaptation, but it's more a long-term walk that we carefully should do together and not become exhausted too early.
Right. And I know we talked about doing this, methodically and with the human in the loop as well. So makes a lot of sense. Earlier this year, we announced together that Bayer is leveraging Google Cloud's TPUs to accelerate drug discovery. Is there anything that you might be able to share around any progress or anything that you'd like to share with the audience here, because that made a big splash?
Yes, it was a very, very good start and very exciting area. Since we have started beginning of the year, of course, now we are shortly after summer break. So the only thing I would like to share today, it's a very good collaboration and there's very good work in progress. Yeah. And again, coming back to the earlier question for maybe decision makers or IT decision makers, executing on such pilots then, such experimental work is much, much easier if you already have your cloud-ready environment produced and can build on that. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the pieces that we're taking away from our experiences and discussions with everyone here in the audience is we can talk about how we can leverage all this all of this different types of AI, but really there are some foundational pieces that need to be set in place in order to be ready to do that, around resiliency, around cost and finance. It's around thinking about your scalability, your scale, your compute, thinking, the high performance computing resources needed, your TPUs that are needed. And then even as was shared earlier, keeping in mind around privacy, security, compliance. These are all pieces that are the foundation of how we can actually leverage and work together, and really get the highest potential out of the use cases that generative AI has to offer. One common theme, I'll just kind of wrap with this, is one common theme is I'm hearing around change management and talent. So it's not only about the tech for tech's sake, but it's also about the cultural aspect of bringing everyone along. Maybe we can finish with sharing a little bit about your experience with how Bayer has reacted to adopting AI, and any tips that you might have for those in the audience.
Yeah, so some of you might imagine that early days, so years ago, not even a decade, but it was just maybe 4 or 5 years ago, so when you have really brilliant, innovative, scientific, medical minds meeting also very brilliant minds from technology science, so you need to do translational work between them. There's a long right approach how you do clinical development that worked very nicely. Look at all the medicine that is out there. That's coming out of this very professional machine. And now AI is introducing new ways. It's requiring new ways. So you can really see and feel, things are getting maybe faster or more accurate even sometimes. And it's easier to work with some tools. So you need to change that. You need to bring these different disciplines together. And that takes time.
Yes.
And that also is a need to allow for failure. It's setting up agile frameworks where you also bring the right people. And very often it's the case that the better you prepare, the more time you invest before you start a project to bring the people together, to clarify requirements and expectations, then the better the execution runs. And at the end of the day, that comes back to creating empowered teams and frameworks in an agile environment.
Wonderful. Well, with that, I think we'll wrap this up. I appreciate all of you for their time and taking the precious time here to be with us today. And thank you, Guido, for sharing about the fantastic partnership that we have and sharing your experiences and knowledge with everyone here. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.